There you are, watching your harem high school anime in your Nico Nico knee shirt, dressed in the finest drip from the Moliminous Tea Public store, when all of a sudden, you're a furry. You didn't ask for this. You didn't choose this. Yet, there you are, and it's treated no differently than watching a normal high school anime. God, furries, am I right? Always so annoying with their degenerate behavior and artwork. Who in the right mind would ever find anthropomorphic creatures and characters interesting? Now excuse me while I go watch some of my wholesome content to get rid of this furball taste in my mouth just from talking about them. Something like Brand New Animal, Wolf's Rain, Cat Planet Cuties. Okay, I see where this is going. I'm not going to say everyone who likes anime will most likely turn out to be a furry at some point or another.
I didn't know it was a furry anime, dude. Sign me up.
But I am saying you're probably a lot more into it than you're letting on, which, let's be honest, isn't the worst thing when most of the girls in these series are 18 with an asterisk.
And the best example of an actually good furry anime that, yes, you are a furry for liking, except for me, of course.
Now, I could talk about BNA or others, but I haven't actually watched those ones.
The anime that I watch is completely dictated by Netflix recommendations.
So Beastars is a coming-of-age story set in the prestigious boarding school. We follow our talking blue-gray and handsome wolf boy protagonist, Legoshi. He's an abnormal wolf who wants nothing more than to be normal and to blend into the background. A hard task for a 7-foot-tall wolf in a school that caters to creatures as small as mice. His friend Jack Adago, who has been friends with Legoshi since they were exceptionally young, a dare named Lewis, who's the popular kid, pretty reminiscent of Sasuke actually, which tells you most of everything that you need to know about him, other than the fact that he's going for something called the Beastar, which is a unifying force for good that unites carnivores and herbivores. On paper, at least. Apparently it's actually just Batman. He unites animals by beating up other animals, and he has a harem of mice.
Jesus Christ, this show is weird.
And Haru, the love interest. She's pretty much just the Belle Delphine of the show. She belongs to the streets and, despite that, is still wanted by her naive Legoshi and even Lewis. For some reason. There's more characters, but I can't go into all of them without spoiling a bunch, and we'd be here for a very long time, and there's only so long that your attention span can last. But despite the differences of all these creatures, they follow the typical high school issues, balancing of friends and schoolwork, battling strict and probably overzealous institutions that want you to be normal, and of course, love. Should you ask that girl or guy who's obviously above your league? Should you accept the girl who's throwing herself at you? And do you really love her and want to boink her? Or do you actually just want to vor her?
Wait, what? Okay, so there's a few things that are different. Unless you're already a furry going into this, since furries are often into fucked up shit like this.
Unlike some shows, the fact that they're animals is played up a lot more, but in a realistic degree. It's the same things humans struggle with, but turned up to 11. We're all still at the mercy of primal instincts, desires, and thoughts that take hold of our minds that we can't necessarily control. And in this world, the whole prey versus predator mentality is a very, very literal concept. The worlds integrate, but only on the surface level. Everyone's smiling and laughing and even in some cases intermingling, but it's still superficial. It's what they know they ought to do, but not necessarily what they want to do. Prey logically know that these predators don't want to hurt them, but their animalistic brains, from years of evolutionary conditioning, is screaming at them to run from them. While on the opposite end, the carnivores on a surface level want to make sure that their herbivore counterparts are as happy and comfortable as possible, but have these physical tics and thoughts beyond their control that make them want to devour them whole as they scream for mercy. And like the most toxic of all relationships, instead of openly addressing the issues each group has with the other ones, they just shamefully push those thoughts and desires deep down and repress them so that they keep up appearances. Beastars is honestly more analogous with life in the 60s, with subject matters dealing with integration, interracial marriage, and the mingling of groups that seem different on the surface, but deep down all want the same thing: to live a happy life. There are ghettos where it's exceptionally cheap to live, but essentially only carnivores live there. Back alley marketplaces where carnivores can feel free to be themselves and even partake in the eating meat. And this is only scratching the surface of the world building that's done in the manga. It takes something that should be more fantastical and grounds it in a more realistic and believable scenario, one that can also easily be extrapolated to fit our modern and past societal structures. It also doesn't simply use animals as some sort of fetish cover. This isn't just a furry trying to beat off on the page. It's not just a story that could exist as easily and as one-to-one if the characters were literally just humans. Legoshi isn't just a tall person, he's an abnormally tall wolf, a carnivore with his interpersonal struggles pertaining to his existence as a peace-loving carnivore in a world that's dominated by his prey. There are very real and tangible differences between Legoshi and Haru, who's a rabbit. Legoshi, if he's not careful, could absent-mindedly tear Haru's limbs off just by pulling a little bit too hard. If he grabbed her or anyone too tightly, his claws would rip into them. And these aren't just examples of what could happen, but are all examples of what does happen in the story. Various carnivores must deal with the fact that their strength is a huge divider between them and herbivore friends. One of the drama students accidentally rips off the arm of his friend while playing. And these accidents are so commonplace that a doctor has no issue reattaching limbs, fixing broken herbivores, because it's just a fact of life. It happens, and it's not even prosecuted as some sort of criminality. This isn't a story where the differences are metaphorical. These are real differences. These are actual differences that are provably true. Obviously, this doesn't really tie into our world as easily at first glance. Blacks and whites, Asians and Mexicans, they don't have some sort of weird difference between their strengths. And even when compared to women and men, the strength difference is negligible at best, really. But it takes a perceived difference that we have between one another, and it makes it very real. Men are assumed to be grossly stronger than women, that women should always be on edge when around men, that men are inherently bad and are taught not to respect women by our society. These are all things that are taught to women and even men themselves, but aren't necessarily true. Most guys don't want to hurt anyone, let alone someone who they perceive as being weaker. But it's also true that, simply speaking from statistics, they are the ones responsible for the largest amount of violence towards women on average. That if a woman is to be attacked, it's most likely going to be from a man. We want to think everyone is kind, but if you're a gambler, there are groups and people who are more likely to cause harm to you than others. And it puts to test those idealistic moral views that a lot of people have. Are you willing to interact with others regardless of a higher chance of something bad happening to you, to prove that yes, not all people in X group are like whatever you perceive them to be? Or will you play it safe and just avoid them entirely? This is a question a lot of herbivores have to deal with in Beastars. Will they just ignore the fact that these carnivores are around them as politely as possible, or will they stick to their moralistic views of this society and interact with them? Despite the fact that, yes, accidents between carnivores and herbivores, through no fault of the carnivore's own or any kind of form of malice, may result in the death of the herbivore. Beastars also by no means attempts to give the solution to these problems. It doesn't act like it's a saver for humanity. Its characters are quite upfront with the fact that this is just how the world is. And while we can strive to be better on an individual level, to expect anything on a societal level of mass change is not and never stated to be a goal of anyone. Legoshi wants a mixed species relationship and is willing to do pretty extreme things to get it. However, he's a rebel character, and without society being against him, he has nothing to rebel against. He doesn't necessarily look down on others, but does expect them to always strive to be the best version of themselves, whatever that may be. Lewis is the epitome of giving in to societal norms. While being mistaken at first glance as a rebel, Lewis was a character born to die in a slaughterhouse, a product of the back alley marketplace. People would come and choose children they wanted to eat and or fuck. Since this is a furry show, obviously the two are always twined, interlocked, because furries are weird. Just go with it. He's saved by a rich deer who buys him. Because he has no children of his own, he decides to groom Lewis to be his successor. Lewis wants to succeed and survive by any means necessary, but within his own role. In fact, there's very few times that he steps out of this character. When Lewis gets mixed up in the back alley, it wasn't as if he was someone who wasn't already associated with it, becoming tangled into this web of crime. He was born into it. It was where he's from. He didn't take a trip to an unknown land, he returned home. Lewis leads a crime syndicate of lions, obviously not something that's normal, but also not completely out of line given his nature. What I'm trying to say is you might consider someone a rebel who's a teenager who dropped out of high school, moved out, joined a gang, and is constantly violating the law because he fits the definition of what we perceive a rebel to be, for sure. However, if I told you that this is an Italian kid in like the 50s, you just say that sounds pretty normal. He's a rebel against the law, but not necessarily societal expectations. In fact, no character really is. Legoshi, to overcome his challenges, often has to rely on the substance he swore off: meat. He eats Lewis's leg to win a fight. He eats bugs despite loving them. Even in the manga, he has a constant pivot from how he thinks he ought to be and how he is. The tribalism that we have, the xenophobia that we have, the out-group versus the in-group, they will never go away. Racism will probably never end. Sexism will never be dealt with. We can get better. We can grow, but we'll never finish. It's a race that we started, but there's never going to be a finish line. Beastars is a complicated story and its simplistic, realistic take at a world such as this. It has the right mixture of fantasy and cold reality. The hero doesn't always win. Screaming louder doesn't power up Legoshi. Actions taken have long-lasting consequences, and nothing in the world is black and white. Not even the panda. He's old. He's got gray in his fur. I would go deeper as I'm actually caught up with the manga, but I know it's hard to read, so most of you are only familiar with the anime. So I won't spoil too much. What I will say is Beastars, for what it is good, because it's not trying to be more than simply what it is. It's a story about the internal struggles of a wolf, a deer, a dog, and a rabbit. They all have things that their genetics force them to be good at, force them to behave like, and they have their ideas of what the world should be like. And that's why I love it. What it's doing is a realistic and believable take. Sure, there are plenty of high school kids who would love to start a movement, but there's also plenty who just want to live a happy life. And that's why I like Beastars. And that's why Beastars is probably some of the best furry bait out there. So I hope you at least like my video, and I'll see you in the next one. You got a fursuit planned, you know? Are you going to Anthrocon?